Did you meet Jeannie and decide that she had to be a subject, or were you looking for a terrific subject for a film?
A video, all the musicians were there to have a tribute to her, and a video of that had gone viral on YouTube, and a friend of a friend saw it, and there's musicians thanking Jeannie for making them look amazing and talking about Jeannie, and you know, who rock photographer called Jeannie, who's Jeannie? And I just got lucky in that it got to me, and I was just completely, immediately intrigued. Because for me, rock and roll photography, in terms of when you think of women, starts with Annie Leibovitz. And if you really look at the dates there, you realize that Jeannie was almost a decade before Annie Leibovitz.
So this has been a multi-year project for you.
Yes.
So the question is that the director and the editor are both female, and how that sensibility framed how you told the story.
I think you have, it's kind of like what Alice Wheeler said in the film as well, I think you have a different perspective as a woman. And I actually think Kelly's the better person to answer this, because she has an interesting story to tell you.
What story was that? I don't know what story that is, but... Oh, yes. So I actually came into this process long after, obviously, Karen started, but she had a short kind of rough cut that she showed me, and I looked at it and went, wow, that's got a lot of potential, and I think this is a great story. But when we sat down to edit, my job was really to just keep saying, okay, that's great. What about Jeannie? Okay, that's great. What about Jeannie? So, because as a filmmaker, you know, she has all this info about the teen dance scene and all this, you know, surrounding information. So my job as an editor is to be random viewer and say, am I interested, am I not interested? And we discussed it, and the whole point of the film is to talk about Jeannie. So every time we kind of started to divert to another topic, and Karen would be like, oh, it's really interesting, and I'm like, that's nice, where's Jeannie? That's nice, where's Jeannie? So that was part of my job, and also as a woman, I think you tend to be more sensitive to balancing a story, especially a story that's told. Many men are in the story and they have very valid things to say, but making sure that there's a good balance, an equal balance between the men explaining and Jeannie telling her own story. And I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that Jeannie was in front and center, and it didn't turn into some sort of archival piece of other people telling us about Jeannie. It was Jeannie telling her own story. And really these people were supplemental and just helping to, you know, explain the context.
And just to add to that, I mean, let's all agree that rock and roll is a male-dominated, you know, environment. So I think it was very interesting bringing, you know, what relatively, you know, unknown story, but also all, you know, women's perspective on that.
The cinematography is so beautiful.
John Jeffcoat and Ryan McMacken.
Right there. But yeah. But I know that, you know, I mean, Jeannie, obviously, with her eye, how much did she contribute in sort of an art design or, you know, a visual direction to where you were going?
That's a really good question, because when I first started talking to this about John Jeffcoat, who the funniest story is he was only ever going to help me out on the first half-day shoot because he was available at the EMP, and the poor man ended up doing the whole film with Ryan. We talked about Jeannie's passion for photography, obviously, and how to make her comfortable with what we were thinking, you know, in the whole process. And Jeannie's fascination with photography meant it was an absolute natural choice to use, you know, the DSLR technology, the Canon 5D and 7D. And they were perfect for this, because Jeannie was immediately interested in the process of how we were building it and telling her story. And she and John would have chats about it. And it was like it was a very collaborative process. But the other element of the whole art design is the incredible work we were able to do with Bell and Whistle. Gabe Keane, stand up. He's left already because he left to organize our party. You're all invited. So that was an important part of it, getting the right sort of nod to the 60s aesthetic. If you think about the album covers, if you look very carefully at the graphic design, it was all research based on what the album covers looked like.
I mean, the visual design of the film is terrific. The cinematography, the titles, the all of it. It's incredibly visual, and any one of those frames could stand as a still, which I'm sure is extremely intentional. And if it's not intentional, you've done a wonderful job.
And I talked about who is the audience, and part of her kind of original rough cut was the audience was more of people who know the scene, who know the music, who know Jeannie. And I, as someone who did not grow up with that music and didn't know anything about the scene, said, okay, I don't really get it. So we decided, okay, if you want this to reach an audience of people who don't already know this story, who don't already know the backstory, then we need to be more clear about how we tell it. So I think that this can be very relevant to many generations, and part of that reason is because as an editor, I tried to constantly watch it as someone who has no idea. She knows all the backstory, I don't. So if I'm watching it and I don't get it, that means the people at home don't get it. So I think you do kind of have to have a passion for it to kind of start the process, but you have to be very careful about being so passionate that your passion overrides your choices in cutting the film, because if you're so passionate that all you see is what you love, then you're making a film for yourself as opposed to a film for other people or people like you, which is fine if that's your audience. But I think you have to be clear about the audience.
And just for the record, I didn't actually grow up with that music.
There's that.
But,
he did preface that with not trying to be sensitive.
I didn't grow up, but it's fine. It's just British sense of humour here. But but you actually wrote, it's really interesting because we actually did a little test screening, very private production, friends, family screening, and I brought in a bunch of young people, younger than all of us, most of us here. So I did test this on a few, some of our interns and 20-year-olds, and they were completely enthralled with it. And that's when I knew that we had got the balance right of what Kelli was talking about. They wanted to know about that music. They wanted to know, and over that, they wanted to know more about Jeannie, and they wanted to know why they don't know about Jeannie. So that's really great.
Karen, Kelli, thank you so much. John, beautiful. Jeannie, thank you guys so much.